Welcome to the 34th episode of Tokenizing Everything, our weekly interview series with thought leaders in the blockchain industry. Today's guest is David Orban, Managing Advisor at Beyond Enterprises. Before we begin, I have to mention that all opinions are solely personal and do not reflect the opinion of Amazing Blocks, Beyond Enterprises, or any other related parties. So, it's a pleasure to have you here today, David. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me. I am wonderful.
Perfect. Then I would say let's dive right into it. Would you like to start by just giving a brief overview of who you are and where your background is in the tech space, so to say?
I studied physics originally, but I didn't want to be an experimental physicist, one of 10,000 people working at CERN or another accelerator. And I wasn't really smart enough to be a theoretical physicist, bringing the next revolution in the grand unification theories or super symmetry or those kinds of things. I entered the field of artificial intelligence as a developer originally, but then I was very attracted by being an entrepreneur. And I started companies both in Europe and in the US, building them, scaling them, failing them, selling them, and so on. And we are still talking about the previous millennium here, right? Um, Coming a little bit closer to the present time, 12 years ago, I was part of the team that designed Singularity University at the NASA Research Park in California. And there we study and teach exponential technologies and how they impact business or our everyday lives. Based on that experience, I published the Network Society Manifesto that articulated how decentralization is a natural consequence of exponentially advancing technologies in many sectors, independent from each other, whether we are talking about solar in energy, 3D printing and digital manufacturing, peer-to-peer learning, and so on. And of course, in finance. So when Bitcoin presented itself, actually for me, it wasn't a surprise. It was a very pleasant fulfilling of something that I was already expecting to happen. I participated in Bitcoin since the very beginning, as well as Ethereum, and have worked together with Brad Yassar, the founder of Beyond Enterprises, for many years on many projects until I joined as managing advisor.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, David, so much for this overview. Very interesting. I see you have a very diverse CV, right? It's hard to single out one aspect, but I think that's also generally the beauty of the tech space, right? So what really struck out, when I kind of did my research on you before this interview, was that you have this saying, "What is the question that I should be asking?" And I would be curious to hear what is the kind of the background behind this. How did you attain this? Yeah, let's say analytical attitude toward, your day-to-day business and generally your life, I would say.
Thank you. That is, if you wish, my personal motto, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it is a very good icebreaker. You can use it when you have in front of you someone that you are negotiating with, or you want to hire someone and you are having a job interview with them, or even if you are alone.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a new challenge, maybe a new job position, or you are in a field that is unfamiliar to you. And I find that the mental attitude that you acquire by going meta, and rather than having a fixed list, that you just check off because you believe that the list is exhaustive and sufficient, this simple question opens the doors to many new avenues of exploration. And it really stimulates the other person if you ask it someone else, or it stimulates your own ability to be more creative about what are the things that you should pay attention to. Of course, we are now in a wonderful, really golden era of knowledge exploration. That is what the internet gave us. We are also about to enter a new era where AI systems are going to assist us in formulating smarter and smarter questions. If you made a query that was formulated like a question on Google recently, you may have noticed that it not only gives you an answer, but it lists new questions that you could be asking. And that is extremely powerful. So then the question is going to become, what are the more useful ways that those lists of questions can be generated, right? So for me, it is very clear that we are on an unending journey. And this journey of exploration, experimentation, value creation, wealth generation is part of what makes an open and free economy so powerful. And if we have to go ahead and create initiatives, projects, enterprises that can evolve positively in such a powerful landscape, then we have to have powerful tools helping us. And I have my own set of tools, and that little motto is a very dear component of the tool set.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it helps, right? Because it also allows you to always kind of, let's say, adjust to the topic, the challenge that's ahead, and or the person that's in front of you, right? And because it's always important to understand the reasoning behind something, right? Whether it's technology or a human being, it's still kind of sometimes a similar logic, right?
Correct.
So another aspect that I find interesting is that you kind of birthed this saying of jolting technologies, right? So what does this actually mean? As I think, I mean, it's quite a, let's say, an interesting perspective, but also I think a very auspicious or futuristic mind in regards to how do we view technology and the influence it will have in the future.
Many of the people listening to the podcast or watching the video will be familiar with what is called Moore's Law, formulated over 50 years ago by Gordon Moore, one of the founders of Intel, based on literally a handful of data points. This was an ambitious prophecy. Basically, Gordon Moore said that if we really made the effort, we could squeeze a number of transistors on a given area that would double every 2 years. And this more or less held true for the next 50 years, which is amazing. It is completely unexpected, and it is what has powered the increasing influence of information technologies in our world. Whether we are talking about our computers on our desks or notebooks, the supercomputers in the data centers, or the supercomputers in our pockets. And I asked myself, what if we looked at Moore's Law as a specific instance of not only other exponential phenomena, and there are, of course, many, including the pandemic that influenced so much of our lives the past year and a half. But what would a generalization further of the trends underlying exponential technologies be? And I actually found several data sets that are based not on a constant rate of acceleration, like the constant doubling of Moore's law, but actually are based on an increasing rate of acceleration. And in physics, there is a term for variable acceleration, which is a jolt. That is the mathematical term for describing a non-constant, a variable acceleration. And so I published the paradigm of jolting technologies that describes this. An example is artificial intelligence, where 4 years ago, Stanford University, together with OpenAI, published a report in which they said, up until 2012, we had AI following Moore's law. And from 2012 onwards, for the past 8 years, now almost 10 years, we are seeing AI doubling every 4 months instead of every 2 years. And so they are designing like a broken line in 2 segments. And I told them, that's wrong. What you are observing is a progressively increasing rate of acceleration in AI and a progressively shrinking rate of doubling. And lo and behold, I was proven right, because a year ago, the CEO of NVIDIA published their data, and they are showing AI doubling in power every 2 months. So from 2 years to 4 months to 2 months, imagine the world when AI will be doubling in power every month, every week, every hour. Well, it is very hard to imagine. And it is even harder for a business to adapt. It is hard to understand what are going to be the consequences in our ability to execute a project, to structure a business model, to update and adapt our regulations and regulatory frameworks when not only blockchain, not only AI, but quantum computing, synthetic biology, and so many other areas will operate as they are already under the paradigm of jolting technologies.
Yeah, very interesting. I think you've definitely, birthed something that is probably going to be around for the entire evolution of technology in the future. And I'll definitely educate people about this in my environment in the future too. So props to you at this stage for this, I would say, good, very, let's say analytical, but also neutral, kind of approach, and also realistic approach to technology in regards to the influence that it will inherit in the future. But speaking about one of the, let's say, technologies of these several technologies that will reshape our world, or are currently reshaping our world, blockchain, right? You mentioned you've been in the Bitcoin space since the early days. You were, I think, if I read correctly, right, the first person actually to own Ether during the launch. People always describe, a certain wow moment, so to say, that really made them excited about the possibilities of blockchain. Others describe more of a gradual path to really, understanding and then also loving blockchain. What was it for you? Was there like a certain moment where it just made click and you realized, okay, is this going to be the future, or was it more of a gradual approach to this?
Beyond Enterprises was founded in 2012, and it had the opportunity and the privilege of both participating in the development and the deployment, as well as investing and incubating some of the most important projects in the blockchain world. the Base Protocol or Science Incorporated or Bancor, Blockchain Capital, so many that they are really too many to list. And there are new projects that are as important, maybe even more important. Equify, which represents a fully licensed bank coupled with DeFi products, so that you can take advantage of both sides of this effervescent experimentation in the world of finance, or Hive, which is a platform and a protocol for coordinating freelancers with a dispute resolution mechanism, as well as a launch platform for vertical decentralized workforce coordination solutions. You can think of Uber and a platform for realizing a specialized vertical Uber. So for me, really, what is important is that even though I have been in the space for 10 years, we are really at the very, very beginning. For me, tokenization goes almost as deep as talking about digital physics. A friend of mine is Stephen Wolfram. His latest book is The Search for a Fundamental Theory of Physics. And he looks at literally how our space-time could be digitized and digital, and how both space and time could emerge as a consequence of those laws that he is trying to find. Now, I am not saying that blockchain is at the base of our reality, but I am saying that as we progress and as we proceed in implementing and analyzing and really delivering the promise of blockchain and tokenization across many sectors or every sector of the economy and our society, we will create an enormous amount of wealth and opportunities. The zero-sum game of trading and hedge funds, where literally you can only win if someone else loses, because that is the trade that is being closed, is a very small part of what is going to happen. One of my favorite questions when I deliver a keynote or I am at a Q&A, and someone asks me, well, but what about the scalability of Bitcoin, or is Ethereum staking ever going to work? I tell them, listen, I have friends who are working as we speak on the colonization of the solar system. And they know that we will have swarms of intelligent robots mining the asteroids within the next 20, 30 years. So I don't know whether it is going to be Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever else. But do you believe that as these swarms of intelligent robots have to negotiate and come to a consensus around the type of resources in energy, transportation, and financial resources as well to really build and sustain that kind of new economy? Are they going to be using checkbooks? Are they going to be using credit cards? Are they going to be using banknotes or wire transfers? And just, painting that picture is ridiculous. We understand none of that is going to be. the likelihood that it is going to be something that is tokenized, that is based on blockchain, that is based on a consensus algorithm that doesn't require the wet signature and the sending via courier of some agreement. Well, that is clear. Once you put it that way, it is clear that blockchain and tokenization have a huge future in front of them, and this future designs an economy that is vastly larger than what we are seeing today.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's yeah, it's always interesting to speak with people that let's say are maybe in the early stages of their blockchain journey and their risks, right? That don't necessarily always see the full potential of it, and it's good, to foster also education in that aspect, right? And what I find interesting in general is also, as I know you're also the chairman of the supervisory council at Singularity Net, right? So you are actively dealing with the topic of AI or AGI, so to say. What I find interesting also is how actually these artificial general intelligences in the future will leverage tokens actually for trust systems, for rewards within the ecosystems. So that's just something that I think will definitely accelerate and disrupt the entire world as we speak, right, in the future.
There are some thorny, open, mathematical, ethical, philosophical questions around the next phase of development in a technological civilization. And these open questions have existential importance because we hope that humanity will have a place in a world that is radically transformed by artificial general intelligences that pursue their own goals and their own objectives and look out in the universe and see with curiosity and fascination how much there is to do and to understand. This is today just a hope. So what is very important, and the reason why projects like Singularity Net have this tremendous responsibility, is to design and deploy systems that can deliver on that hope, that can actually implement and structure a future civilization where AGIs and humanity in its own diversity and in its own way of evolving can coexist. This is a very concrete and very deep responsibility, and I am absolutely honored and privileged to be involved in the project.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been following them. I have to say, no financial advice, right? But since the early days, and it's very auspicious, and also a lot of challenges obviously ahead that need to be coped with, but definitely on the right path so far, I think. So maybe going to do the Being Crypto community question that they always ask every week. I thought they did it quite interestingly. You have that saying that technology in general is redefining society, entrepreneurship, and ultimately the meaning of human being of the 21st century. And they kind of changed this to, basically how is blockchain redefining society, entrepreneurship, and ultimately the meaning of being a human in the 21st century?
We are social animals. And since the beginning, when our tribes were roaming the African savanna, we had to develop abilities to perceive, to analyze information, to decide quickly was the other group of humans that we were about to meet friendly or an enemy. And based on those life or death decisions, Through hundreds of thousands of years, our evolution allowed to then accumulate knowledge, accumulate technologies, and evolve societies. And together with that evolution, also improve the decision-making systems that lead to peaceful cooperation or to deadly conflict. In the 21st century, I think it is clear to more and more people that we have to make every effort possible to avoid decisions that lead to a deadly conflict, very simply because with nuclear weapons, the alternative of failing to avoid that can lead to a total collapse of civilization. The planet will be fine. You know, in another million years or 10 million or 100 million, there will be other things that biological evolution will create. But in the meantime, humanity's dream of keeping and exploring will have been shattered. So one of the crucial promises of blockchain is to yield novel governance systems, novel consensus mechanisms. And it is also an important source in the opposition that blockchain finds with regulators that cannot conceive of an alternative, that cannot realize that the limits and the constraints within which they were designed and they live are very subjective and very temporary. The very concept of nation state is just 400 or 500 years old. And the twin lottery tickets and rolling of the dice that each of us lives under, the genetic lottery on one hand of who were our parents, and the geographical lottery on the other, whether we have been born in a high-income country or a low-income country, define 90% of our lives. Only a few can escape, and we call them lucky, these constraints. So with the help of blockchain on one hand, and with the help of other technologies like genetics and synthetic biology, or the understanding of the mechanisms of messenger RNA and others, CRISPR, very exciting, which contributed to saving us, those that made it from the pandemic, at least for now, these are going to transform the world. We are looking at a world where the freedom to make choices with unbounded opportunities can be realized by billions of people who in the past, and for many still today, wouldn't have been able to make those choices. And so the view that I hope more and more regulators will embrace is that of the proactionary principle, as opposed to the precautionary principle, which unfortunately is included in the Lisbon Treaty that regulates the way the European Union works, and which tasks an impossible proof of scientifically and technologically proving that a new technology will have no harm as it is being introduced in society, and that is impossible. The proactionary principle, in the opposite, looks at future benefit. And it says, if we can expect an overwhelming future benefit, then it is our responsibility to accelerate the rolling out of that technology. And that is what blockchain represents, and that is what regulators should realize. and then rather than being extra cautious and pretending that everything is a scam, that everything is a fraud, that everyone is only out there to get out from their own purvey, they can look at a future that is exciting, that is inclusive, that is empowering and enfranchising for so many people. And I hope they will be able to make that leap.
Yeah, definitely. I'm on your side on that. Like the regulators are definitely going to play a crucial part. And I think right now is a very, let's say, yeah, challenging time for this because there's a lot of, let's say, noise from the regulatory side, right? The upcoming MiCA regulations in the EU, which will affect the token economy on that level. You know, there's a lot of talk in regards to how regulators address Binance's, so to say, decentralized entity structure, right? So we're in a very interesting time when it comes to this, and it's going to be, yeah, let's say crucial to in regards to how the regulators address this. Obviously, then we have now kind of defined the regulatory side as one of the key challenges for accelerating blockchain adoption. Which other challenges would you mention? Because personally, just from my perspective, I always think that education is really one other of the core aspects that you really need to foster. But happy to hear your kind of take on that.
I totally agree. And initiatives like your podcast series form a crucial role in education. Seeing people here together with us in this live recording and then looking at the statistics of this podcast or others and YouTube channels, it is really wonderful to see that anyone who just takes one step in the direction of educating themselves finds very, very rich resources available. And then after the first step, they can make the second step, the third step. And as soon as they want to, they can then turn around and share the knowledge that they have in turn acquired. And the magic of the internet today is that indeed it will aggregate an audience that it is exactly proportional and corresponds to the level of knowledge and the type of message that the person is sharing. Now, there is a mirror to that effort because if you told me that I need to educate myself because my car actually, and this is true, is broken down in front of, the gate outside my garden in my home in Italy, where I am right now, rather than in New York, where I would be, where I took refuge from the pandemic, and not complaining. Italy is a fantastic place if you can choose where to pass a pandemic. And you told me, hey, David, you have to get your act together. You just have to educate yourself and learn to repair your car. I would actually tell you, thanks, but no thanks. I don't have the time. I don't have the willingness. I don't have the tools. And I don't have the talent. And I don't even mention the fact that I don't have the passion for those kinds of things, right? So that is why we have, on one hand, specialized people, car mechanics, or whatever the problem with my car is, that can do that rather than me. And we have cars that have standardized interfaces and are fairly easy to use. And they are getting easier and easier. So in the blockchain, we have to recognize that is the case, and that should be the case. Yes, we have enthusiasts who have been happy to compile Bitcoin code and run miner software on BlackBerry, not BlackBerry, on Arduino cards and do crazy stuff, which I remember doing years ago. But it is unreasonable to expect quotation marks normal people to learn the same. So Coinbase totally deserves the success they've had, even if purists complain that Coinbase is centralized, and since you don't own the private keys to the Bitcoin that you hold on Coinbase, they are not your Bitcoin, not your keys, not your coins. True, true, but the responsibility is of the specialists, is of the practitioners to make sure that whether we are talking about something as simple as buying Bitcoin on an exchange, or we are talking about something a little more complicated as participating in a DeFi transaction, or we are talking about something still largely unexplored as creating a DAO and modeling a business entity, or even wondering what the successor to the double entry bookkeeping will be in a world of tokenized transactions. Well, there are going to be very natural growing waves of adoption and inclusion. And we cannot complain that there aren't billions of people using Bitcoin or Ethereum today. There cannot be. There shouldn't be. If there were, it would be too early, and it is inconceivable. Billions of people don't care about those things we care about. They are not ready to get to the level of specialized knowledge that is today required in order to embrace Bitcoin. Now, whether it is Bitcoin, whether it is Ethereum, the trend is unstoppable. So is it going to be iPhone 15 or iPhone 16? It is guaranteed that sooner or later, billions of people using their smartphones, whether iOS or Android or something else, are going to participate in blockchain transactions with a wonderful decentralized consensus mechanism, and they will own their private keys, and they will do all of those things without realizing. Just as when I get in my car and I drive somewhere, I do not worry about the synchronization of the turbo injector or whatever else the engine is doing with me not even realizing. So we cannot blame the people who say, wait a minute, that's not for me. We cannot accuse them of wanting to be ignorant. The responsibility is ours to make what we are building radically easier to use, to the point that it literally disappears and they don't even have to worry about it.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right, that you mentioned this, because I think also this is going to be true, right? In order to foster, right, the mainstream adoption, we need much more intuitive tools in general, and tools that need to be created by practitioners, as you mentioned, right? And on that regard, people always kind of compare also the evolution of blockchain to the internet, right? They say, okay, if you ask someone on the street, you know, yeah, what is the internet? Most people would also struggle in regards to explaining what the internet actually is. But then I know also that you have a kind of a slight, sometimes different approach, where you say, okay, blockchain may even take a step further. Could you maybe elaborate in regards to the influence that blockchain in comparison to the internet will have or may have in the future?
The sign of maturity is when you can stop being a geek and still use the tool. When internet was in its infancy, you absolutely had to be a geek. the TCP/IP protocol, which is underneath everything we are doing, was not standard. You had to install it on the computers, and then you had to configure it. Email attachments, which are now trivial, or attaching an image to a Facebook post or anywhere else. Well, back then, all these transport protocols couldn't understand and didn't understand what those attachments were, and you had to manually encode and decode images that were represented as characters at the tail end of the email message that you would be sending. So, a first sign of blockchain and Bitcoin or Ethereum, whatever else, again, maturity is going to be when the address is going to disappear. And we are seeing a sign of that. The crypto domains, whether .crypto or .eth or many others, actually allow people to send each other cryptocurrency without having to worry about the addresses. And that is a very good first sign. Now, the birth of internet companies like Amazon or eBay or others came together with the birth of many other internet companies that died. And today we look with an almost unavoidable survivor bias to the success of Amazon, and proudly declare that the success of, or the triumph even of e-commerce was unavoidable. But at the time when Amazon was born, the vast majority of people didn't believe that they could succeed. They didn't believe that people would order things on the internet rather than going in the store. Yesterday, my wife, or actually the day before yesterday, my wife ordered a pair of shoes on Amazon. And then the day after, the shoes arrived, and she's very happy. And I told her, isn't it funny that you ordered something as intimate, as personal as a pair of shoes on the internet without ever touching them, without ever trying them on, and you are so satisfied? With the mindset of 20 years ago, that would have been absolutely inconceivable. So, when people, on one hand, point the finger to the various projects and say that most of them will die, most of them will not succeed, that is not only a trivial observation. It is natural for them to die. They are not going far enough, because traditionally it is said that 99 out of 100 startups fail. Not enough. 999 out of 1,000 must fail. Otherwise, we are not experimenting enough. We are not daring enough. And the relative ease with which a crypto project can start is fantastic. I do not care about the scammers. Scammers have no evolutionary role. They're not representing a thin layer of freedom to commit crime in a society that has not become totalitarian. When there are no scammers, it is a bad sign. It means that you live in a society that is so fearful that it cannot afford to have a few people who are not better, and the only way they can survive is to commit crime. But then we can and we should allow and incentivize as much experimentation as possible. And that is what blockchain together allows. And only after we carry out all the failed experiments, all the pets.com or all the failed home delivery, freshfood.com experiments that absorbed billions of dollars and went nowhere, only then we will find what is truly changing the world. And my expectation is that this is going to happen with the blockchain and tokenization. And when, after the fact, we will just do the list and make the sum of the network value of the successful projects, let's say in 10 years' time, we will be looking at a total value that is larger than the value of the internet companies today. When we look at unicorns, well, we will be talking about decacorns. And the decacorns are the former startups that are worth more than $10 billion. And if today we have a few internet companies that are worth more than $1 trillion, we will be looking at companies that can be worth more than $2 quadrillion. And what those companies will do? Well, I gave one example. They will mine the asteroids. What else? Well, a gazillion things. And I would love to keep exploring. And I am actually enthusiastic to be doing what I do as managing advisor of Beyond Enterprises, because we are literally exploring what is possible on this fantastic frontier.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's technology has so many different aspects that will disrupt our lives in the future, and it may be hard to make concrete let's say estimates or details, but I think we're all sure that it will definitely have such a big impact in the future as well. But yeah, coming to the end of today's conversation, which has been very insightful, and we're already way above the anticipated time, but that's okay. I think you have so many insightful let's say details and information in regards to the space. I have one last question that I always ask my guests, and I know it's quite difficult to give a definite answer to it, but it's still always interesting to see the different perspectives. And that question is, where do you see blockchain and tokenization in 10 years from now?
So we can and we should look at network value, what inappropriately is termed the market cap of Bitcoin and all the other cryptocurrencies. They represent a shift in economic value. But, as I also said, the economy is not a closed system. We are also adding to the economy. So, as blockchain and tokenization grows, soon we will realize that the countries that are more favorable to it have a better ability to grow their GDP and to build opportunities for their people, similarly to how there are today companies that have an insufficient penetration of broadband internet, for example, or an unreliable electric grid, and they are unable to participate in the modern world to the degree that they could and they should. But a further component is going to be, which I already mentioned, that the geographical subdivisions in nations will become more and more untenable, ridiculous, arbitrary, recognized as unjust. And the free association of participants in ambitious projects, world-changing projects, will come from individuals in remote and distributed teams that we are already seeing. During the pandemic, every company was forced to run an experiment that they didn't want to have, and realized that indeed people can work from home as well as they could in an office. And many are now finding those workers not to want to go back in the office, not to subject themselves to the hour or 2 hours per day commute that is completely useless in order to collaborate together both within the organization as well as outside the organization with customers and suppliers. So these trends are going to become stronger and stronger over the course of the next 10 years. And maybe one of the most important questions that we have to ask ourselves is geopolitical. What we mistakenly call mining, and I wrote an article in Bitcoin Magazine, I think in 2014, where I offered an alternative metaphor for the crucial activity of securing the transactions on the Bitcoin network. I said that we should call it instead of mining, we should call it weaving, because weaving designs a rich tapestry of collaborative effort, and that collaboration of the weavers is what secures the transactions that are the threads going across the woven textile, and the tapestry emerging represents the second and third layer applications on top. Well, nobody cared about my metaphor, even though I do believe that it is far superior than mining. But whether it is mining or weaving, what it represents is an unstoppable disruption to the petrodollar, and together with the economically unbeatable reality of solar energy, which is itself geographically distributed, to the very existence of one of the last remnants of 20th century geopolitical detente, which is the flow of oil from the Middle East across the world. Because when we have data centers of Bitcoin mining or weaving all over the world, and we have solar panels generating energy or storing energy in the form of Bitcoin, which can be seamlessly transferred as if we were transferring energy across continents, then the trillions of dollars that the United States currently spends in order to support the petrodollar with military effort is evidently not only useless, but losing. And the question is, if we have seen the collapse of the Roman Empire that did not go so well, if you were in the Dark Ages in Europe for the next 500 years after, or we see the collapse of the British Empire that went a little bit better if you look at it from the point of view of a Gandhi that is able to kick out the Brits, and there are conflicts, of course, but not a major war around it. Well, the question is, how will the United States react to the demise of the petrodollar and of the role that it has had for almost 100 years in supporting the U.S. economy and the United States as a nation? The difference being that they have, I don't know the number, let's say to round it up, 15,000 nuclear bombs, right? So it is actually very, very important to help and to assure the U.S. that it is going to be okay, that it doesn't have to worry, that actually embracing blockchain, embracing solar energy, embracing widespread installations of Bitcoin mining and weaving facilities all across its own territory as well as everywhere else is going to lead to incredible benefits to everyone, both inside and outside of the US, and that they don't have to fight tooth and nail and unending wars in order to maintain the status quo, because it cannot be maintained, it won't be maintained. And the new geopolitical world order is going to be based on blockchain and tokenization. And it is going to be very different from what we have seen for the past 50 to 100 years. But we have to work hard to make sure that the transition is not under severe conflict. It is not under bloody wars and revolutions like it has been in the past.
Yeah, thanks, David, so much. I think this is a very, interesting closing word, I must say. And I fully agree with you that defining, securing the Bitcoin network or kind of validating transactions, right, as mining is kind of a misconception, in my opinion, too. Because I realize that especially when people are new to this space, it's always hard to explain, okay, it's not just like traditional mining, right? So weaving is definitely something I'll keep on using to explain it. It's a good story. So again, also props to you on that regard. And generally, it was a real pleasure to speak with you. A lot of very interesting topics we touched on, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. And I'm happy to have you in the future again when we can discuss maybe what the future of ETH 2.0 holds, right? And other
Nicolas, thank you very much for inviting me, and I am happy to respond to any comment or question from anyone watching this recording. I am very easy to find. Just put my name in your favorite search engine, and you will be able to reach me on every and any platform. And I will be thrilled to engage and answer comments and questions that may come up.
Perfect. Then, thanks so much. And in regards to the listeners, thanks also to tuning in, whether it was a live show, whether it was on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, or any other channel that this podcast is published. And if you have any questions in regards to tokenization in general or blockchain, I'm sure you can reach out to David and me. And you know where to find us. And looking forward to next week. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.